It all began on a quiet Sunday afternoon when the house felt wrapped in an almost unnatural stillness. The kind that settles over a home right before something shifts, something you can't name yet, but you feel it pressing against your skin. My daughter Aisha had just returned from her best friend's place, clutching her worn sketchbook like a shield, her voice bright with the small adventures of her day. Leo, our golden retriever, greeted her at the door with that familiar explosion of joy. Tail whipping back and forth, ears flopping as he pressed his whole body against her legs. I was in the living room, hunched over a little repair project, trying to lose myself in the simple rhythm of needle and thread. Leo had always been more than a pet to us. He was woven into the fabric of our days, a steady heartbeat of warmth and loyalty. That afternoon he patted over to me, his favorite chew toy dangling from his mouth, those deep brown eyes locked on mine with unmistakable hope. "Play with me. Fix this. Notice me." I smiled, reaching down to take the toy, when Aisha appeared at the bottom of the stairs. She froze mid-step. Her gaze snapped from me to Leo and back again, eyes widening in that slow, dawning way that makes a parent's stomach drop. The sketchbook slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud that somehow echoed louder than it should have. "Mom, what are you doing?" Her voice came out small, unsteady, laced with confusion that bordered on something sharper. I opened my mouth, but nothing useful came out. Because whatever she thought she'd walked in on, it wasn't that. Not even close. Yet the angle, the timing, the way I was bent forward with Leo right there. I could see exactly how it looked from where she stood. My heart hammered against my ribs. I straightened quickly, holding up the toy so she could see the torn seam, the white stuffing spilling like snow. "It's just this," I said, voice thinner than I wanted. Leo ripped it. I was checking if I could stitch it up. Aisha didn't move. She crossed her arms, studying me the way she does when she's trying to solve one of her art puzzles. "You looked guilty. Like you were hiding something." The words landed like small stones in still water, rippling out and making everything feel heavier. She wasn't wrong about the guilt, not entirely, but it had nothing to do with what she imagined. I panicked, and that panic had painted the moment in shades it didn't deserve. I was startled, I said, forcing calm into my tone. "You came down so quietly. I didn't expect anyone to see me wrestling with this old thing." Leo sat beside me then, tail sweeping the floor in slow, uncertain arcs, as if he understood the tension and wanted to smooth it away. Ice's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. She still wasn't convinced. "You've been acting strange lately, Mom, not just today." "For weeks." The air in the room tightened. She was right, of course. There had been a restlessness growing inside me for a while now, a quiet ache I couldn't name, a sense that some part of my life had slipped out of alignment and I hadn't bothered to fix it. I'd buried it under routine, under smiles, under the thousand small tasks that fill a mother's days. But Aisha had always seen more than I wanted her to. She was sharp, perceptive, the kind of daughter who notices when your laugh doesn't reach your eyes. "Aisha," I said softly, "there's nothing going on. I promise." I just didn't want him to swallow any of the stuffing. For a long second, she held my gaze, searching. Then she bent to pick up her sketchbook, cradling it against her chest like armor. "If you say so." Her tone was neutral, but the skepticism lingered in the set of her mouth. She paused at the foot of the stairs. "You'd tell me if something was wrong, right?" "Of course." I forced a smile that felt brittle. "You can always ask me anything." She nodded once slow, deliberate, then disappeared upstairs. The moment the door clicked shut, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My legs felt unsteady. I sank onto the couch, Leo immediately nudging his head into my lap, warm and solid. "You really know how to stir things up, don't you?" I murmured, scratching behind his ears. But even as I said it, the unease coiled tighter in my chest, because Aisha wasn't finished asking questions. I could feel it. And if she kept looking, really looking, she might find the cracks I'd spent years pretending weren't there. Not just about Leo, not just about that awkward moment. About me. About the parts of my past I'd locked away so carefully. I sometimes forgot they were still breathing. That evening the house stayed too quiet. Aisha remained upstairs longer than usual. I told myself she was probably lost in her drawings, but a small, persistent voice wondered if she was replaying the scene in her head, turning it over. Searching for the truth behind my clumsy explanation, I called her down for dinner. hoping food and normal conversation would smooth the edges. She came with her sketchbook still tucked under her arm, face calm but guarded. We ate mostly in silence until I tried to bridge the gap. "How's the new art project going?" I nodded toward the book. "Fine." One word, clipped. She pushed rice around her plate, then looked up. "You've been distracted for a while now, Mom, not just today." "I've noticed." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean distracted?" I kept my voice even, but inside everything tilted. "Like your mind is somewhere else." She watched me closely. "And then today with Leo. It was just strange." I wanted to laugh it off, to wave away the concern, but the words stuck. She wasn't wrong. The restlessness had been building, a slow tide I kept pushing back. How could I explain it without pulling her into waters I wasn't ready to swim myself? "Maybe I've just been tired," I said at last. "Work's been a lot. It catches up." She didn't look convinced, but she let it drop, shifting to talk about her friend's new puppy instead. I nodded at all the right moments, but my thoughts drifted elsewhere toward the staircase. Toward the questions still hanging between us. Toward the feeling that something unspoken was gathering strength. That night, after Aisha went to bed, I sat on the couch staring at Leo curled in his favorite spot. His breathing was steady, peaceful. I thought about how long he'd been with us through every quiet crisis, every unspoken worry. He had been my anchor in ways I hadn't admitted, even to myself. And now, because of one torn toy and one misinterpreted moment, the past felt closer than it had in years. I glanced toward the stairs again, wondering if Aisha was asleep or lying awake, still turning the afternoon over in her mind. The house was silent except for Leo's soft snores. But the silence felt fragile, like it was waiting for the next crack to appear, and somewhere deep inside, I knew the next crack was coming. That night the silence in the house felt heavier than usual, like it was holding its breath. I stayed on the couch long after the lights were off upstairs, Leo's head resting across my feet, his warmth the only thing keeping the chill at bay. Every creak of the old floorboards made me glance toward the staircase, half expecting Aisha to appear again, sketchbook in hand, ready to ask the questions I still wasn't prepared to answer. But she didn't come down. The house stayed quiet. Too quiet. The next morning arrived with pale winter light filtering through the curtains. Breakfast was mechanical. Toast, tea, small talk that felt scripted. Aisha sat across from me, eyes flicking between her plate and Leo, who lay under the table hoping for crumbs. She barely spoke except to answer my questions in short, careful sentences. When she stood to leave for school, she paused at the door, hand on the knob, and looked back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're sure you're okay, right?" Her voice was softer than the day before, almost gentle. It caught me off guard, the concern in it, the way it made my throat tighten. "Of course, sweetheart." I smiled, the same reassuring one I'd used 1,000 times. "Don't worry about me." The words felt hollow even as they left my mouth. She studied me for another second, then nodded and slipped out into the cold morning air. The door closed behind her and the house seemed to exhale. Leo followed me back into the living room, tail wagging slowly as if trying to coax my mood upward. I sat on the couch, absent-mindedly running my fingers through his fur, my mind drifting to the torn toy still lying on the floor like an accusation. Its jagged edges reminded me of everything I'd been fraying inside, small tears I kept telling myself would mend on their own, but they weren't mending. The restlessness had grown teeth. It gnawed at me in quiet moments, whispering that I had been running from something for years. Not just from Aisha's questions, but from the truth of how fragile I sometimes felt. How Leo had become the one steady thing when so much else had felt unsteady. I looked down at him now, his trusting eyes meeting mine, and a wave of guilt washed over me, not for anything I'd done, but for the parts of myself I'd never let anyone see. Not even my own daughter. The sound of the front door opening startled me so badly I nearly jumped. It was far too early for Aisha to be home. My heart lurched as I turned, and there she was, standing in the doorway, face pale, eyes wide. In her hand she held something small and rectangular. A photograph. My stomach dropped when I recognized the edges. The faded colors. "Mom," she said, voice trembling just enough to make the word crack. "What is this?" I stood slowly, legs unsteady. "Where did you find that?" "It was in your drawer." I wasn't snooping, I needed tape for my project, and it just fell out. She stepped further inside, unfolding a small piece of paper that had been tucked behind the photo. Her eyes scanned the lines, then lifted to meet mine. You wrote that you felt like you were losing yourself, that you didn't know how to fix things. What were you talking about? Is this about Leo? About me? The room tilted. I reached for the paper, but she pulled it back, not angry, just desperate to understand. It's complicated, I managed, the words tasting like ash. How could I explain something I'd barely explained to myself? Leo let out a soft whine, sensing the shift, and patted over to nudge Aisha's hand. She glanced down at him, then back at me, her expression softening but still uncertain. I'm not a little kid anymore, Mom. I can handle it. Before I could find the words, Leo pressed closer, resting his head against her leg as if reminding us both he was still here. The moment stretched, fragile and full of everything we hadn't said. I took a breath, ready to really try to bridge the gap. Then came the knock. Firm, urgent, completely unexpected. Both of us turned toward the sound. Neither moved at first. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. Aisha's grip tightened on the photograph and note, holding them like shields. Who could that be? She whispered. I had no idea. But as I walked toward the door, a fresh wave of unease curled through me. Somehow I knew this wasn't random. Whoever stood on the other side was about to pull another thread loose from the carefully woven story I'd been telling myself for years. I opened the door. A man stood there, late 40s. Neatly dressed, holding a slim folder. His face was cautious but kind, vaguely familiar in the way strangers sometimes are when they carry news you didn't ask for. Can I help you? My voice stayed steady even as everything inside tilted again. I'm sorry to disturb you, he said, polite but direct. My name's David. I'm from the local rescue center. I've been trying to track down some old records, and they led me here. It's about Leo. Aisha stepped up beside me, confusion mirroring my own. Leo trotted over, tail wagging slightly as if recognizing an old acquaintance. Leo? I repeated, pulse quickening. What about him? David glanced down at the dog, then back at me. He was part of a special support program years ago trained to help people through difficult times. Emotional support, mostly. Something happened with his last placement, and we lost track of him. Until now. My mind raced. Leo had always been my comfort, my quiet constant. But I'd never known there was more to his story. Are you saying he was a therapy dog? The words felt strange coming out. Yes, David nodded. A very good one. The records show he was placed with someone dealing with severe anxiety after a major life change. That placement ended suddenly, and we thought we'd lost contact. Seeing him here, healthy and loved, it's clear he found his way. I just needed to confirm he was safe. Aisha stepped forward, voice firm despite the tremor in it. Leo saved my mom. He's family. What does it matter where he came from? David smiled gently. It doesn't, not in the way you think. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. He handed me the folder. These are his old records. Maybe they'll help you understand him better. He turned to leave, but Aisha's curiosity flared. Wait, why did his last placement end? Was something wrong? David hesitated. The person he was with. They decided they didn't need him anymore. But dogs like Leo, they sense things, even when people won't admit they're struggling. When he left, it wasn't because he failed. It was because someone wasn't ready to accept the help. I closed the door after him, folder heavy in my hands. Aisha looked at me, then at Leo, understanding dawning slowly across her face. I think he knew, she said quietly. He knew you needed him, even if you didn't say it out loud. I opened the folder, ready to see what else was inside. And then I froze. Tucked between the papers was another photograph, one I had never seen before. It showed Leo sitting beside a woman. A woman I recognized instantly, someone I thought I'd left behind forever. The photograph trembled in my hands, the edges sharp against my skin. There sat Leo, his fur golden in the sunlight, eyes bright with that same trusting gaze he'd always given me. And beside him, a woman I hadn't thought of in years. Her smile was soft, familiar, the kind that carried memories of late-night talks and shared secrets, nor, the name alone pulled at something deep inside. A thread I'd long ago tried to sever. Aisha leaned closer, peering over my shoulder. Mom? Who is she? Her voice was quiet, laced with that mix of curiosity and concern she wore so well. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick with the weight of unspoken history. I lowered the photo, sinking back onto the couch. The folder lay open on my lap, its contents spilling out like confessions I wasn't ready to make. Her name is Noor, I said at last, the words tasting distant, almost foreign. She was someone very close to me. A long time ago. Before you were even born. Aisha sat beside me, folding her legs under her, waiting. She didn't push, just held the space the way she sometimes did when drawing, letting the picture emerge on its own. I hadn't shared much about my life before her, before the routines of motherhood swallowed the sharper edges of who I'd been. I thought those stories were mine to keep buried. But here they were, staring back at me through Leo's unknowing eyes. We were best friends. I continued, voice steadying as I spoke. Inseparable after college. She was like a sister, the kind who knows your silences better than your words. But life pulled us in different directions. She went through some dark times. Loss, heartbreak. We drifted. I had no idea Leo was part of her story. Aisha's fingers traced the edge of the photo gently. Do you think she gave him up because she didn't need him anymore? Like David said? I shook my head, a small ache blooming in my chest. Noor wasn't like that. She always tried to do what she thought was right, even if it meant letting go. If I had to guess, she probably believed he'd find someone who needed him more. She was selfless that way, sometimes to a fault. We sat in the quiet for a moment, the only sound Leo's soft breathing as he settled at our feet. His presence felt heavier now, layered with meaning. He wasn't just our dog anymore. He was a bridge to a past I'd left unresolved. Aisha glanced at me, her expression thoughtful. What happened between you two? Why did you drift? The question hung there, simple yet piercing. I looked at the photo again, Noor's face pulling me back to nights of whispered confessions, to the warmth of friendship that had once felt unbreakable. But friendships, like anything else, can fracture under weight they weren't built to carry. It wasn't one thing, I said slowly. Life got complicated. I was starting a new chapter, you were on the way. Noor was dealing with her own storms. We promised to stay in touch, but promises fade. Aisha nodded, absorbing it. And Leo? He must have been with her during all that. Yeah, I murmured. He probably was her anchor the way he's been mine. The admission slipped out, raw and honest. Leo lifted his head, ears perking as if he understood. Aisha reached down to scratch him, her touch gentle, and in that small gesture, I felt the distance between us narrow just a little. What will you do now? She asked after a while. Will you try to find her? The idea settled over me like a shadow, equal parts daunting and necessary. I think. Maybe I will. Not to reopen old wounds, but to let her know Leo's okay. That he's loved. Aisha smiled faintly, leaning her head against my shoulder. I think she'd appreciate that. Over the next few days, the house felt lighter, as if airing those truths had cleared some invisible fog. I contacted the rescue center for more details on Noor's placement with Leo. They couldn't share much privacy rules, but they gave me a starting point, an old address, a possible city. It was enough to begin searching quietly in the evenings after Aisha went to bed. Leo seemed to sense the change too. He stuck closer than usual, following me from room to room, his steady gaze a reminder that some bonds don't need words. Aisha, for her part, eased up on the questions. Instead, she shared more stories from school, sketches she'd been working on. One night, as we sat in the living room, she looked up from her pad. Leo didn't just save you, Mom. I think he saved us both. Her words wrapped around me, warm and unexpected. I glanced at Leo, sprawled contentedly on the rug, and felt a swell of gratitude for him, for her. For the way life sometimes circles back to heal what was broken. But even as the days softened, a new undercurrent stirred. The search for Noor led me down digital paths I hadn't expected, old social profiles, fragmented updates. And then, one evening, buried in a forgotten corner of the web, I found something that made my breath catch, a message, unread. From years ago. It was from Noor, sent just after Leo's placement ended. The subject line read, I hope he finds you well. My cursor hovered over it, heart pounding. What could she have written? What truths might it hold? I clicked at the screen filled with her words, familiar, aching, full of things left unsaid. But as I read, a chill crept in. Because hidden between the lines was a detail I never knew. Something about why she really let Leo go. Something that changed everything. I thought I understood. Part 4. Word count 900. Noor's message unfolded on the screen like a voice from another life, familiar yet distant. Each word carrying the echo of years unspoken. I hope he finds you well, it began, simple and sincere. She wrote about Leo, how he'd been her quiet companion through nights that felt endless, how his presence had pulled her from edges she hadn't wanted to admit were there. But then the tone shifted. I let him go because I had to, she continued. Not because I was better, but because staying would have meant facing what I couldn't. You, of all people, would understand. My breath caught. Facing what? The cursor blinked mockingly as I scrolled further. She mentioned a choice of fork in the road where our paths had truly diverged. Not just the drift of time, but something deliberate. I knew about the baby, she wrote. Your news reached me through mutual friends. I was happy for you, truly. But it stirred things in me I wasn't ready for. Envy, maybe regret. Leo deserves someone who could give him stability, not the chaos I was drowning in. The words blurred slightly as tears welled. Envy? Regret? Noor and I had shared everything once, dreams, fears, the small triumphs of young adulthood. But this hinted at depths I'd never seen. Had my happiness been her unraveling? The thought twisted in my chest, a mix of sorrow and guilt I hadn't expected. Aisha must have heard my sharp intake of breath because she appeared in the doorway, sketchbook dangling from one hand. Mom, you okay? Her voice pulled me back, grounding me in the present. I minimized the window quickly, but not before she caught the glow of the screen. Yeah, just reading something old. I forced a smile, but it felt thin. Leo stirred from his spot on the rug, padding over to sit between us, his tail thumping softly as if to bridge the sudden gap. She crossed the room, perching on the arm of the couch. Is it about Noor? Her perceptiveness never failed to surprise me. I nodded, weighing how much to share. She wasn't a child anymore, she'd said so herself. But some truths carried weight that could bruise. It's a message from her, I admitted. From right after she let Leo go. She knew about you. About my pregnancy. It affected her more than I realized. Aisha's brow furrowed. Affected her how? Like she was jealous? Not jealous exactly, more like it highlighted what she didn't have. I hesitated, choosing words carefully. Noor had her own losses back then. A relationship that ended badly, dreams that didn't pan out. Hearing about my life moving forward, it stirred things up. She absorbed that, fingers absently stroking Leo's fur. That's why she gave him up. Because she felt unstable? Partly, I said. But there's more. She mentions facing something she couldn't, I think it has to do with us. With why we really lost touch. Aisha's eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? I took a breath, the confession building. We had a falling out. Not a big fight, just a slow fade. But reading this, I wonder if there was resentment I missed. Or pain she hid. The room felt quiet, save for Leo's steady breathing. Aisha leaned closer, her warmth a reminder of the life I'd built since. You should reply, she said softly. Tell her about Leo, about us. The idea bloomed tentative, hopeful. Maybe I will. But as I said it, doubt crept in. What if reopening that door brought more than closure? What if Noor's chaos hadn't fully faded? Over the following days, I drafted responses in my mind careful, measured words that acknowledged the past without demanding too much. Leo seemed to watch me more intently, as if sensing the internal storm. Aisha, too, hovered gently, sharing her art more freely. Like small offerings of normalcy. One afternoon, as rain pattered against the windows, I finally hit send. Noor, I wrote. Leo found his way to me. He's been my lifeline, just like he was yours. I'd love to know how you are if you're open to it. The message whooshed away, leaving me staring at the screen, heart in my throat. Hours passed with no reply. Then days. The silence stretched, amplifying every what if. Aisha noticed my distraction during dinner one evening. Still nothing from her? I shook my head. Maybe she's moved on. Or maybe the email's old. She answered, Aisha said with quiet conviction. People don't forget bonds like that. Her faith touched me, a subtle warmth spreading through the worry. Leo nudged my leg under the table, his eyes full of that unwavering trust. In moments like these, the connections felt tangible threads binding us across time and mistakes. But then, late one night, as I scrolled through old photos on my phone, the notification chimed. An email from Noor. I opened it, pulse racing. I can't believe it's you, she began. Leo, he always knew where he was needed. I'm glad he found you. But there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said years ago. My hands went cold. What's something? The message continued, delving into memories we'd shared, then veering toward the unspoken. It wasn't just envy, she wrote. There was love. More than friendship. I never said it because I didn't want to complicate things. But when he told me about the baby, I realized it was too late. So I stepped back. Love? The word hung there, reshaping every memory. Not sisterly, deeper, unspoken. I sat back, stunned. Leo whined softly, pressing against me as if to steady the world that had just tilted. But the message wasn't done. If you're open, she ended, I'd like to meet. There's more to explain in person. The invitation lingered, full of promise and peril. What would reopening that door mean now? Before I could process, another chime. A new email? No, a calendar alert? We thought it was from the rescue center. Subject, update on Leo's records. I clicked, curious. And then my breath stopped. Attached was a document I hadn't seen before, a transfer form. Signed by Noor. But the date. It was right after I'd adopted Leo, and there in the notes, ensure he goes to her. She needs him more than she knows. Noor hadn't let him go randomly. She'd sent him to me on purpose. The revelation hit like a slow wave, steady at first, then crashing. Noor hadn't simply let Leo go into the world hoping he'd find a home. She had chosen me, deliberately. The transfer form in my inbox bore her signature, dated the very week I brought Leo home as a stray from the shelter. In the notes field, her handwriting neat, familiar read, ensure he goes to her. She needs him more than she knows. She had known I was pregnant. She had known I was scared, even if I hadn't said it aloud. And she had sent Leo to be my quiet guardian. I sat frozen in front of the screen, the glow painting my face in soft blue. Leo lay at my feet, head resting on my ankle, oblivious to the storm he had carried across years. Aisha was asleep upstairs, the house wrapped in that deep midnight quiet that makes every thought feel louder. I reread the note, then Noor's email, then the transfer form again. Each piece clicked into place like fragments of a puzzle I hadn't realized. I was assembling. Noor had loved me, not just as a friend, but deeper. She had carried that feeling silently while I built a life that didn't include her in the way she might have hoped. Instead of resentment, she'd given me the one thing she knew could steady me through the unknown, Leo. The guilt that followed was sharp, but beneath it lay something softer, gratitude, awe. A kind of belated tenderness for the woman who had once known me better than anyone. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I paced the living room, Leo trailing me with patient steps. When dawn finally bled through the curtains, I opened a new message to Noor. My fingers hovered, then typed, Noor, thank you. For Leo, for seeing what I couldn't. He's been everything, my comfort, my mirror, my reason to keep going on the hardest days. Aisha calls him our family glue. I'm sorry for the years we lost. I never knew what you were carrying. If you're still willing, I'd like to meet. Not to rewrite the past, but to honor it. To say thank you in person. I hit send before doubt could stop me. The reply came faster than I expected 2 days later, while Aisha and I were making breakfast. The subject line was simple. Yes, let's talk. We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown, neutral ground, no pressure. Aisha insisted on coming along. I want to meet the person who gave us Leo, she said, eyes bright with curiosity and something fierce or protectiveness maybe. I didn't argue. Having her there felt right. The day arrived crisp and clear. Leo stayed home with a neighbor, but his absence was palpable, like we'd left part of ourselves behind. The cafe smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread. Noor was already there, seated by the window, hair shorter than I remembered, but the same thoughtful eyes. When she saw us, she stood, A small, uncertain smile breaking across her face. We hugged, awkward at first, then real. Aisha hung back a moment, then stepped forward and offered her hand. I'm Aisha. Thank you for Leo. Noor's eyes glistened. He's lucky to have found you both. We sat. Words came slowly, at first small updates, surface stories, then deeper currents. Noor spoke of the years after we drifted. Therapy, new relationships that didn't last, moments of clarity that arrived too late. She admitted the love she'd never voiced, how it had shaped her choices without defining them. I didn't want to burden you, she said quietly. You were starting something beautiful. I thought stepping away was the kindest thing. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. You weren't a burden. You were my friend. You still are if you want to be. She nodded, tears slipping free. Aisha watched us both, silent but present, her sketchbook open on the table. She began drawing quick, soft lines that captured the moment without words. We talked for hours. About Leo's habits, Aisha's art, the small ways life had surprised us all. When we finally stood to leave, Noor bent to hug Aisha. You've got your mother's heart, she whispered. Aisha smiled, fierce and gentle. And Leo's loyalty. Outside, the sun had shifted. Noor turned to me one last time. Can I see him? Just once? Of course, I said. He's waiting. We walked home together, the three of us, steps unhurried. When we opened the door, Leo bounded forward, tail a blur, ears flapping straight to Noor. He pressed against her legs, whining softly, then looked up as if to say, I remember. She knelt, burying her face in his fur, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Aisha and I stood back, giving them the moment. Later, as evening settled, we sat in the living room, four of us now, in a way. Leo sprawled between Noor and me, Aisha curled on the couch with her sketchbook. The air felt lighter, fuller. Not everything was resolved. Some wounds leave scars. But the silence between us had changed from heavy to hopeful. Noor stayed for dinner. Stories flowed easier. Laughter came naturally. When she left, she hugged us both tightly. Thank you for letting me back in, she said at the door. Thank you for sending him. I replied, she smiled, eyes bright. He always knew where he belonged. As the door closed, Aisha slipped her hand into mine. Leo nudged between us, warm and solid. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the people and the dog who had carried me through every unspoken season, I understood something simple and profound. Some connections arrive exactly when they're needed, even if we don't see them coming. They heal what was broken, bridge what was distant, and remind us that love, quiet, steady, unconditional, has a way of finding its way home.